Good morning. Good morning. It's Make It Happen Monday. It's 9 a.m. and I'm here most Mondays. I've just back from a 3-week break and you've now got me for the next 6 weeks up till the 12th of December. So good morning. Good morning. Today and this series is all about success without stress. And we're going to be talking about what is it? How do we know when we're stressed? What kind of stress works and what kind of stress doesn't. And I'm very pleased to say that we have at least one, but maybe more guests coming on to share their experience of stress, success without stress without success. That's probably not the right one to be going for or attracting. And I'd love to know your stories and your strategies because that's what we're going to be sharing over the next couple of weeks is I'm going to share some of my stories. I'm just going to take these out because it feels a bit weird because I can hear myself talking. As I have no guest today. And I'm going to invite you to do the same. Please share your stories, comment below, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn or Facebook. If you want to send me an email anonymously, I know who you are, obviously, but I could share them anonymously to inspire and help other people. But before we get into that today, I want to sort of talk about this because one of the things I know that can cause people stress is feedback. And one of the things I am aware of is that me and many other people, you can get feedback from just one person. And even though you've got hundreds of people that are giving you evidence-based feedback, their reactions, their response, their engagement, it's all telling you that everything's okay. Just one person saying it's not okay can send you off on a sort of different tangent. And I can think of two experiences for me personally. One was when I wrote my first book, Manage Your Critic from Overwhelm to Clarity. And I had, I've got a reasonable number of 5-star reviews, but there was one person who put a comment like, it's more of an autobiography than a self-help book. And I can't remember how many stars I've got now. Sort of the stars haven't really sort of landed with me, but I remember that sort of sitting with me for some time, to the point without me realizing consciously that when I wrote the first edition of the Do Daddy Go to Ditch book and it went off to the editor, I had virtually cut my story out of it. And yet I talk about the why in here. Your story, it matters. Your story has got the information, the insights that you need in order to get to know you and your own processes. And yet I'd cut it out. And when I tracked back, where was this sort of cutting out coming from? It was because of this one comment. Now, fast forward again. I have a newsletter update. I've been told not to call it newsletters because people won't be interested in that. But I send out a weekly update at 8 o'clock every Wednesday called Success Without Stress. And somebody just commented, well, why would I want success without stress? And I was like, yeah, I guess there is a certain amount of stress when you go for success. That's okay. But when I said success without stress, I was really thinking in terms of the stress that really makes you feel ill, that puts pressure on you, that you end up snapping and being irritable and short-tempered with the people that you love. Maybe it forces you to withdraw because you go into flight, fight, or freeze and you just can't find the words and you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't want to engage with anybody. And so, there was a while where I sort of almost stopped promoting my Success Without Stress newsletter because just that sort of that different perspective. So what I know for me, success, and I've got the dictionary definition. Let me just look them up. Thank you. Whoever's joined me live, please say hello. It's always nice to know who's with me. So success is the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. And there is a thin line between success and failure, so they say. The good or the bad outcome of an undertaking. So the good or ill success of their maritime enterprise. So you can actually have ill success and good success, which I didn't even realize until I read that definition. And guess what I'm saying is that, so I made an assumption that the success that we wanted to have was the good success. But I was also making an assumption that the stress that we don't want to have, the without the stress, was the kind of stress we don't want to have. So with that in mind, good morning, Loretta. It's lovely to see you. It's been 3 weeks. I've missed you. I want you to think about stress for you is like what? And success for you is like what? And I'm going to share mine while we're here. Loretta, if you want to share yours, that'd be great. But if you watch it on replay, post #replay and share yours. Now, for success for me, it is that sort of setting out to do something. And success is when I've achieved that. And what I know is that for me personally, I can become stressed and anxious and frustrated when I feel like I'm not making any progress. And I particularly had that experience with the second book, Do, Delegate or Ditch, which I set out to write in 2014. And then when I went on a writing retreat and I was asked the question, what's the first thing you do with your clients? I was like, oh, actually, they can't really do, the delegate, and the ditching bit until they manage their critic. If they're really being critical of themselves, and they're putting themselves down and they're criticizing other people, they're criticizing the situation, they're not going to be able to get themselves into that neocortex part of the brain, the curiosity part of the brain, which is going to help them to be able to problem solve and to get curious really about how they're making decisions, how they plan, and how they communicate to other people. And so I started the writing of the book in 2014, went on a writing retreat and realized there was another book that had to be written. And so Manage Your Critic came out. And then ever since I published that in December 2016, I have been working on writing the second book. It then went to the editor and came back in March. And, you know, there was a sense of, I remember feeling that success feeling. It was like, yeah, it's gone to the editor. But when it came back, there was something wrong with it. Something was missing and I couldn't put my finger on it. But then we had the pandemic and I got busy with trying to, you know, pivot. I think the whole question of pivot your business. Most of my work was done as 1, 2, and 3 day retreats. I had to move them all into online programs. And that was quite stressful. And I remember feeling quite poorly after about a year. And so for me, success is that having achieved something. But I've learned over the years, particularly managing the critic, that it's really important for us, if we're going to do something that's going to take us longer, that we have to be able to measure the small amounts of success that tell us we're making progress, that we're going towards that. Good morning, Suzanne. It's lovely to have you. Success as a word sees linked to career. For me, it's about finding happiness and balance. So tell me a bit more. What would I hear and see that would tell me that you've got happiness and balance? How would I, if you were having to describe it to somebody else, or you were having to describe it to your own system, what would you hear and see, or what would we hear and see that would tell you that you've got success? Loretta, success is happy, joyful, not too much decision making required. Stress is too many choices and indecision. And I've just seen the other one. Morning, Cheryl Andrews. It's so lovely to see you all. I've had 3 weeks off. And I can't get my phone to come up now. I just want to go into this definition of stress. It says here that it's pressure or tension exerted on a material object, a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. So if we take what Loretta's just said, is about, you know, having too many decisions or be stuck in indecision. And definitely for me, for me personally, stress comes. My most frequent pattern of stress will be when I know what I want and I then hear what people around me need, so whether it's my clients, my family members, or my friends, and I cannot picture in my mind how I can do all of it. When I look at the diary and I imagine the space, and because of when people want stuff, I can't sort of do the sort of maneuvering of it all. And that's when I will feel stressed, when I can't, and I guess that might even relate to your balance, when I can't balance the needs of what I need with the needs of what other people need. What I've learned over the years for me personally is that I can take that, I can normally compromise my own needs for quite a period of time. I've worked out now about 6 weeks. So if there's something particular that I want to do, whether it's writing my book or launching a new product or getting fitter or, I don't know, just reading more, crocheting, whatever it is that I want to do that is a bit more about what I want rather than what we want, I can sideline that for about 5 or 6 weeks. But then the stress will build up because that's usually something that my system is asking for, because it's something that I need in order to be resourced to be working, learning, living at my best. So often when I'm craving a soaky bath or a crocheting session or just sitting and curling up and reading a book from cover to cover, I love it when I can sit with a fiction book and spend 4 or 5 hours and read it from cover to cover and finish it in an afternoon or a day. Normally only happens when I'm on the beach or on holiday, but if I can do it in the winter on a Sunday afternoon, it's absolute bliss. but it doesn't happen very often. But what I do know is that if I've got that niggle in my mind that I need to do it and I keep putting it off and keep putting it off, then it doesn't work. And what I've learned, a bit like the success measures, if you've got something that's going to take time, like my second book, it's definitely getting there and I can feel the sense of progress coming. But if it's going to take a long time, I have to measure small amounts of success. So what I know now is I'm rewriting those chapters, and there's a part of me that's freer and is now coming out in those words. And I feel like I'm now included in that piece of work. But equally, when it comes to reducing stress, if I know what I need is a day off, but there literally is no space in my diary to take that kind of day off, whatever that means to me at the time, then actually, if what I need is to read or crochet or do a jigsaw or do something just to give my mind a rest, that actually, even if I can't read for 4 hours and read a whole book cover to cover, sometimes sitting for as little as 3 or 4 minutes and reading a paragraph, I can feel the tension in my body just go. But what I've been curious about, and I want to invite you to think about now, is that I was so good at being externally referenced and making sure everybody else was okay. They often didn't even notice that my physical body was giving me the clues that I was stressed. And I've realized that for me, when I'm stressed, my metaphor for it is it's like I've got an elephant's foot on my chest. And I can even, like, just there, I can even just think about it, I can sort of feel that it's really difficult to breathe. Now, for other people, when they're stressed and they're overwhelmed and they're frustrated, sometimes it's sort of like clouds around their head, or other people, it's like they've got their feet in treacle. It's just everything's hard work, everything's heavy. Now, success is, for me, there's a lightness to me. And so just as I'm talking out to you now, I'm kind of learning about my model as I talk to you, is I've got a heaviness for stress and a lightness for success. Now that I know that, I can get curious about that lightness and I can start to notice what's working and celebrate things that are going well and really keep my system and my attention on what's working. But equally, if I start to feel a bit of tension in my chest or I feel a heaviness there, then I can use that as a clue that there is maybe unconsciously, there is something bothering me. And as you suggested, Loretta, quite often when I work with clients, I call the process of nurturing the negative niggles. There's often things we've put to the back of our mind. We've said, I'll do that later. I'll get around to that eventually. And quite often it is maybe some feedback, like I mentioned at the beginning, where it's been niggling away at you. Maybe it's an unmade decision. Maybe it's a conflict of how you can keep everybody happy. Maybe it's the fear or concern about having a conversation that might cause some conflict or discomfort. People won't be happy with it. Maybe it's just not knowing what to do next. But if we don't stop and we don't listen to those niggles and we just give them a moment of our time, the stress that I'm talking about, success without the stress, is the stress that builds up in our body and then often forces us to stop, either because we get a headache or we get stomach ache, or I think it's, I'm trying to think when it was now, probably 2019. I ended up in hospital because I did chest pains and they thought there was something wrong with my heart. And actually, I think, looking back, it was actually, there was a lot, I had a lot of stress going on in my system and I wasn't listening to myself. I wasn't taking time out to pay attention to what I needed. My attention was external, but I wasn't listening to my own body. And I just think our body will make us stop if we don't. And I quite often talk to people who are saying to me things like, am I going mad because, my husband asked me if I want a cup of tea and I burst into tears. It's like, that's not who I am. Or my children said this and I snapped their head off. I was really angry and cross. So I want you to think about, what would you hear and see that would externally, and what would you perhaps hear or see, sense or feel internally that would tell you that you're stressed? And how could you pay attention to those early warning signs? And one of the things I do with clients, and I encourage you to do this, if you want success without stress, is you have to have really real clarity of what success is. You have to have clarity of what stress, your experience of stress is, so that you bring it from your unconscious mind to your conscious mind, and you go, oh yeah, mine is like, for me, it's that chest pain. I kind of know if I get that tension in my chest, then I'm usually not listening to my heart, literally not listening to my heart. I'm not paying, I'm up here too much, planning, organizing, but I'm not listening to how I think or how I feel. And even as I press my hands there today, I can feel some tenderness across here. And so is often my clue that my system needs some time to be listened to. And I have got a week this week, which is my writing week, which means I'll spend a lot more time introvertedly and more time actually listening to my own system. But when you know your model for success and you know your model for stress, what you can start to do is get curious. So you can pay attention and you can celebrate every little moment of success you get. You can be much more tuned into when there's some signs of stress coming up. You can also get curious about what happens in between. So what happens between success and stress? In my model, what I know is I often lose clarity of what it is I want to have happen. Maybe lots more information have come in. Loads of people have asked me questions. Maybe I've had some feedback from the book and I'm like, oh, I really want to publish it, but it's not right. I need to do some work on it. And so actually what often happens between success and stress for me is I lose clarity because the decisions I have made, either I took action and it didn't work as well as I thought it would, or it didn't happen as quickly as I thought it would. Or I get new information or new requests or new opportunities, and I haven't yet stopped and said, well, what would I like to have happen? I haven't stopped and actually checked with myself, what do I actually want? If I have clarity of what I want, then there's a really good chance that what's missing and what has to happen in between is if I'm going that way, is I haven't got confidence in myself or the process to do it. And so I have to take some time out to think, actually, I often tune into, well, when I've done something like this before, or I've learned something else before, how did I learn to do something I didn't know how to do? And if I can get the confidence in my ability to learn something new, and I remind myself I've learned things before, then the fact that it's unfamiliar would help me get there. But if I'm time poor, it's not about skill, or maybe I haven't got the inclination, I don't want to do it, but it has to get done. Then it'll be about, what do I need to do to actually delegate it? Who do I need to ask to do that? And if I've got clarity and I've got confidence, I know that either I'm doing it or someone else is going to do it, but I'm still feeling stress. Usually that is because something is changing or something needs to change. And I just haven't given my system time to acknowledge how I feel. I've ignored the fact that I'm sad about some grief. I had a bit of, over the last couple of weeks, I've had 2 bereavements of friends, people that are younger than me, who just such lovely people. They're just gorgeous souls. And it's only now as I'm talking, I sort of still can feel that thing. And so the stress is happening because I keep trying to ignore that and I keep pushing it aside. But I will, when I've got this week out now, take some time to just write about them and celebrate who they were and the difference that they made to my life. And just connect with that, because if I know for me, between success and stress is I either don't have clarity of what I want, I don't have confidence in myself to either do the thing or ask someone else to do it, or something is changing or has changed. And it requires me to give myself some time just to acknowledge how I'm feeling. Now, that equally can be like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting and scary, kind of acknowledging how I'm feeling. So that's one thing I'm going to encourage you to do, is you can look at your own success model, your own stress model, and go, what happens between success and stress for you? But you can look at what happens between stress and success. And so when I'm really stressed, often the first thing I have to do is just stop, even if it's just for a few minutes, and take some really big, deep breaths. Because the likelihood is, if I'm stressed, I've been holding my breath. It's common practice, or people say that when we're anxious, we take shorter breaths, we hold our breaths because like not sure what's going to happen. So I know for me that I have to stop and become more conscious of what's happening inside for me. Take my attention. I even close my eyes sometimes, just so I'm stop reading social media, stop looking at what everybody else is doing, and just come back to myself, come home to myself, and just check in and think about what's happening inside. And one of the things, I got this meditation from someone else, and I wish I could, I think it might have been Sean Young, who's now Sean Llewellyn. But basically this meditation that she gave us was a sort of like, imagine a gold halo above you, and then you run the halo down you, and you might sort of notice if there's any sort of hooks or niggles or whatever. And you imagine this halo is warm and bright. And as it's going down your body, sort of all the way from your head to your toes, that it's actually healing and soothing and clearing away any tension or any stress. And you might, as you go through your system, sort of notice a bit of tension here or a niggle there. And you can just run this halo all the way down to your feet and then bring it all the way back up. A bit like velvet, where you sort of smooth it against the grain and with the grain. And I find that just stopping sometimes and allowing that to happen really works for me. That can often just remind my system that even if I'm worried about something that's going to happen, or I'm upset about something that has happened, right now in this moment, I am okay. Because that, right here, I'm not being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. I'm not going to, if I was worried about paying the mortgage, that's not the case for me. But if I couldn't pay my bills and I was worried about being homeless, it isn't happening right here, right now. That's a projected or a worrying or an anticipating about something. So that would be the first thing I do. The second thing would be to start to notice what is working, what's going well, to rebuild that foundation. Notice what I'm grateful for. I've just reading the book Magic, and it's like the first exercise, and there was like count your blessings. I always talk to my clients about, what is working, what's going well, what has worked, just so you can start to remind your system again of what is okay. Because I can't start problem solving. I can't ask myself what I'd like to have happen if I'm still in my reptilian brain or mammalian brain, stressing about whether I fit in, whether people like me, whether I do things right, whether I'm going to have a home, whether I've got enough money. If I'm stressed and my cognitive capacity to problem solve isn't there is no point to me actually trying to get clarity of what I want, have confidence in myself, process whatever's going on. The first thing I do, I have to actually sort of build myself back to that, am I okay now? And one of the reasons why people don't always ask for help is because they feel that it's going to make it worse by saying it out loud to somebody else. But one of the things that I know that happens for me personally is if I can tell somebody else about it, that part of the brain, the mammalian brain, that we're designed to be in a pack, we're designed to be part of a group. But when you can talk to somebody and they don't judge you, and they don't make assumptions, and they don't try and make suggestions, and they simply hold that space with you, that part of your brain instantly goes, oh, we're not on our own. Everything's okay. And so that's why talking to somebody about how you're thinking or feeling stressed can instantly change your perspective, change your experience. And that's why, for me, sometimes it is about just listening to myself, being with myself, telling myself a different story, talking to myself in a different way, doing those sort of meditation activities or breathing and remembering what's working. But equally, if I go and tell somebody else what is working, it kind of increases that level of belief, if you like, because I get that feedback from the other people. But sometimes I have to go through the process of telling them about what's not working, that I need to be able to express it and expel it, and to let it go and say, actually, I'm really cross about this, or I'm really angry. Grief is a weird thing, because that's, we get emotions where we think it doesn't feel right. And I often, and I've noticed a pattern of mine, I think, well, but I hardly know the person. I hardly see them. I can't remember the last time I saw them, but why am I feeling so sad? I almost query whether it's okay to feel that sad when you don't know them that well. And so I get into this sort of manager critic bit, because I'm criticizing myself for being so sad, but actually maybe I'm just a really lovely human being who feels things deeply. And what I've discovered in both cases with both Dean and Carrie, that are the friends that have passed away, is as I've gone back through my memories, I'm like, actually, I spent quite a bit of time with them, and they've both been in my home, and I'd forgotten some of those visits that they'd come here. And so actually my system had remembered. I can now remember where Dean was sat, and I can remember where Carrie was. And I didn't remember that. So I thought I was making a right load of fuss over nothing. And, being overly sad, which was unnecessary. I know I wasn't quite that unkind of myself. But the point being is that often our system is remembering things that we're not consciously aware of. And so having someone to talk to can help release that stress. So I know we've had some comments. Susan's got, I would see how happy and well balanced I am. And so again, when you see happy, I'm going to make up, but maybe I'll be seeing a smile, or I might hear you talking about certain things. And when well balanced, is that well balanced inside or outside? The more you can understand that, the more clarity you've got, the more you can start to work out, when I've got success, stress, and there's going to be a spectrum, isn't there, along here, where there's a little bit of stress because we're going through some change. And that's okay. But there's a stress where we completely crumble and we can't process and we can't engage with things and we're exhausted. And I guess that is also okay if it's part of a process, because we then breathe and, in my case, meditate, talk about what's working, talk to people about what's not working, and then get myself to a place where I get clarity, confidence, and then I can handle the change, and then I do something different, and then I get success. So there is going to be stress, I believe, that is okay and is part of the process. I guess it's when we have no success without stress, really is more about making sure that you're having success, and that you're acknowledging that as you go through. So I'm thinking about marathon runners, their bodies are really stressed. But when they finish, I think a couple of days before, they don't do a huge amount of training. They would have done all their training and they rest their body before they put their body through that stressful marathon run. And then, at the end of it, you could often see them cry, or they release that stress. So it's not constant. That's the thing about success without stress. It's the stress where the success is taking up more of the space and energy than the stress. But it's not completely without it. So probably that person who said to me success without stress, I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. But I also know that when I meet people and they're completely stressed, what they're wanting is to feel some kind of success, and they want to get rid of that stress, that level of stress. And so it is the right message to the people when they're in that space. But over time, you do learn that stress is part of a success process or a cycle. It certainly is for mine. And if yours is different, please let me know. So I'm just going to go through these things before we wrap up today. So I get shortness of breath, like I need to sigh a lot. It's great noticing, Loretta. And it's knowing that, because when you know that, you could consciously learn to sigh more on a regular basis, like daily, go, and then you'd be getting it out before you get to that point where you're stressed, rather than waiting till your body's like collapsing and making you do these things. Nikki Dibben, good morning. Your body definitely gives up when your brain and heart and soul refuse to. Been there, seen that, done it. Yeah, been there myself. And one of the things I love, this Successful Business Minds, the book by Helen Monahan, she talks about meeting of the minds and sort of checking in with your head, your heart, your body, your soul. I add in my gut. But learning to actually listen to my whole system has been part of the process that I've gone through over the last few years. Very good at listening to other people, got much better at listening to my cognitive, my head, but wasn't particularly good at listening to my heart or my body. And I'm really sort of focusing now, listening to my gut and my body, and then even starting to notice I do have a soul that wants to be heard. Thanks for sharing that. Loretta, Saber-tooth tiger gets referenced a lot. Sometimes think life would be easier if we did have real threats rather than imagined. Be curious about that, and just sort of where does that's coming from. I know we use saber-tooth tiger. It's because the reptilian part of the brain is this fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. But I think the thing to say is that the threats are real in our, it's in the modern day world where we might put something on social media and someone might, troll us and be horrible to us. The fact that we feel we might become isolated, we might lose our business because we lose our reputation, all of those things come back to the same feelings that we would have had of a saber-tooth tiger. It's just that, as you say, the saber-tooth tiger is visible and you can see it, and other people go, well, that's a reasonable reaction because that thing might kill you. I guess the other thing is that the other stuff, it could also kill you, couldn't it? If you didn't have a mortgage and you couldn't pay your mortgage, you didn't have a house, you didn't have the income, your business wasn't working, then it's the same thing. It's life-threatening. But it's just that for me, it's that, like you say, it's not as visible, which is why I like to share these stories on here, to share my inside stories so that I can make what's happening inside for me more visible for others. But it's also to encourage you to do the same, because the more we can get these invisible stories visible, we will come up with different analogies than the saber-toothed tiger. But ultimately, we feel threatened, whether it's life-threatening or whether it's just scared because we don't feel like we fit in or we don't belong or we're making the wrong decision. There's a sense of threat is ultimately what is going on, whether it's a physical, mental or emotional. And as you say, the physical ones are often easier for people to support, to understand, to have compassion for. But the invisible ones are the ones that we have going on inside of us. But we can change that by learning to listen to ourselves more effectively. That grief is horrible and incredibly difficult to get beyond. It is. And I would say to you that I've also looked at what works about grief and what doesn't work about it. And for me, grief means that I have loved and I've been connected and that I've been really blessed to know gorgeous, wonderful people. And so if I never experienced grief, then I won't really have been really living and connecting. And so I'm even grateful that I get to experience grief. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be experiencing gorgeous, wonderful people in the world. Well, we're running over because I'm so excited. I've been here for a while. Let's have a quick look then at the questions. So I've been talking for a bit. We've been talking about success without stress. Given what you've heard today, what would you like to have happen? Just take a moment now and think about, it's great that you're listening to me, but I always want you to stop and pause at the end of these shows to really think about what you'd like to have happen. Given what you've heard today, what would you like to have happen? And then for that to happen, how do you need to be? What kind of you is that you? And for you to be like that, what kind of resource or support might you need? And as always, if you are struggling to get access to that inside story, stopping and actually really listening to and learning to trust yourself, and you're curious about your own success models and stress models or something else, maybe you have, as Loretta says, a big decision to make, then please keep me in mind. I'm always here to listen. And I really want to help and support you to achieve that success without the stress. And if just having somebody that you can talk to occasionally, I've got one lady that sees me for an hour every 6 months. Sometimes just knowing that that's in the diary and there's someone to talk to can make all the difference. So without any further ado, have a fantastic Monday. I'm really looking forward to next week. We're going to have Sam Palmer, who's a menopause and movement expert from Midlife Makeover, who's going to be talking about the stress that our body goes under through the menopause, and how we can have more success with that during that period of time in our life. I look forward to seeing you all next week on the 14th of November, 9 a.m. with Sam Palmer. Have a fantastic week. Speak to you all soon.